Alright, so, I've read some of the things on this site, and from what I've gathered, all of it is simply here to scare, and most of it is based off of the paranormal, but the story I'm sharing with you is not made up. It's not exactly scary as it is disturbing. Saddening, for me, because the person who wrote the note I had found that day was a close friend of mine, a best friend. Her name was Alex, a slightly overused name I know, but she was Alex. An everyday kid who dealt with all of the stuff that everyday kids deal with, bullying, being one of those things, attempting to have fun, and trying to get through the week without crying over a breakup, the death of a pet, or whatever it is that was bothering her at the time, tweens. She was nearly 13 and in her eyes life was hectic. And I guess that in the end, it really was. Anyways. Life was good for the both of us, filled with smiles and laughter. But it seemed to change drastically, due to the death of her family and her disappearance. She couldn't smile with me anymore, because she was missing. There was no doubt in my mind that she was out there somewhere. Maybe taken hostage, but not dead. All I know is that the search continued, for both her and the killer. I prayed to God she wasn't dead. Maybe someday, she'd just be there, and life would be good again. But after a while, like everyone else, I gave up hope. I finally let go. I tried to hold close to me all of the memories I'd made with her. I looked through old scrapbooks, walked past our favorite places to hang out, and scrolled through old texts. I smiled every time I saw her humorous and smart-ass replies. One day while doing this, I turned off the phone and threw it on my bed. It was to the woods, now. I didn't like it there, but she always insisted we went every Friday. And so I'd continue doing it, even though she wasn't there. You could call it commitment. After having been in there a good 30 minutes, I stepped on a piece of paper. It looked worn and torn, but despite my lack of interest in ripped paper, I grabbed it. The writing on it looked familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on who could have written it. Keep in mind, we didn't have any of the same classes, so I couldn't really remember writing I hadn't looked at to copy onto my tests. It's what I'd read that told me who had written it. And you're about to read the same thing. It was titled My Confession, and the writing was sloppy. It looked shaky, like it had been written in a hurry. Note, I've fixed the misspellings and grammar issues. Like the writing, I think it was rushed, so she didn't have time to think while she was making this, my confession. Before you read this, I need to tell you my name and you need to report this to the police as soon as you're done reading it. I can't write this wrong, but I can try, can't I? My name is Alex Goodman, and I am the missing girl whose family was killed on February 8, 2006. I've been thinking about what I've done a lot recently. It's been eating away at me, but not because I regret it. No. I'd do it again if they were still alive. Try to understand, I was raised in a Christian home. I'm scared of hell, and now that I know I'm going there I only fear it more. I'm tired of fearing it, so I'm just going to get this over with and go. I'll leave this to whomever finds it, so this mystery of who killed my parents is solved. I did it. That's all there is to it. There's only so much a girl can handle. Through all the shit they gave me, I've lived through it, hurting no one but myself. Given my situation, that's all I could do. I cared that I might go to hell. I wanted to hurt them so many times. I got urges to end their lives, but I couldn't because they'd raised me to fear going to hell. One day, I couldn't care anymore. I killed them. I got their blood on my hands because I was tired of having to take it out on myself. I've left everyone worried because I couldn't control it anymore. I hurt myself so many times when I just wanted to hurt them. I bet people are still searching for me. All I left was my blood on my bed sheets, but no body. I stabbed myself so that I would seem as a victim rather than the killer. It would be fishy if I was the only one alive and unharmed, but I fixed that, didn't I? It was a waste though, because I've come to admit to it in the end. It felt good after I finally got rid of them. No more bickering. No more plans of divorce. No more hitting me, telling me I'm going to hell and doing nothing but comparing me to my sisters who, might I add, I killed too. They had it coming to them. But now that I've killed them, I guess I have what's coming to me, too. I guess I would have gone to hell anyways. I at least had to have some fun before I did. So now that I've confessed, you don't have to look for me. I've punished myself. Don't look for my body. I don't deserve to be buried or put to rest. Even if you try, you won't find me. Just know that I'm dead, and in hell now. Goodbye. The note ended there. I was wailing. All of this newfound information was heavy. Why was I the one to find the note? Was I the one who she wanted to have read it? I don't know, but I regretted picking the piece of paper up. I honestly didn't know she was capable of such a thing, and to think she could have gotten away with it. You have to wonder though, if she's still out there. Sometimes I wonder if she's still alive, and sickly. Part of me still hopes so. She was my best friend, and no matter what she did, I'll love her until the end. Despite what she'd done to herself and her family. If you're wondering, I didn't give the note to the police. I instead posted it here. More people deserve to know. If you knew her, now you know where she went and what she did. I've got nothing more to say. I'll stop here. Credit to Hannah Arthur. Post views 2063. Please wait. They were on their hands and knees staring into the large gash in the ground. Mallory gripped the loose gravel at the lip of the hole under his calloused fingers, and his nose flared up from the rolls of dust cascading up his snot-sloshing nostrils. Charcoal caked their faces. Benjamin's was blacker than the canopy of darkness over the splintered-out barn roof. The sky's hue shifted like a panther's fur rolling in the shadows of fanning jungle leaves. And Mallory nudged Benjamin with his dirt-matted shoulder again, which Benjamin ignored again, and a loose board fell from the buckled-open barn ceiling again. Water had collected over its white-painted roof and soaked into its boards, eventually causing its ceiling to cave, smashing 2 cows dead, and 1 pig unconscious. The floor was wet. The barn animals ignored the 2 men. Benjamin said to Mallory, "Your arms are larger." Mallory said, "What has that got to do with anything?" "Means you've got more of a hulk of muscle," Benjamin replied. "Logic, logic, so you creep down there." Mallory shook his head. They were staring at a pair of glowing maroon orbs moving around deep in the belly of the hole. The orbs vanished in a blink, and would reappear in another. Mallory shifted his soggy knees in the mud. "What are they?" Benjamin asked. "I told you when you asked last," Mallory said. "I haven't the foggiest clue." "What do you suppose?" "I don't suppose anything." Mallory's feathered eyebrows scrunched down and the creases at the edges of his mouth fell into a bulldog's frown. Supposing never got any guy anywhere. He supposed that was true. Benjamin scratched at a flaky scab stain behind his ear. The 2 continued to sit there like tables, their palms in the dirt, knees in the mud, and rears asking for a kick into the maw of the hole. Benjamin scratched behind his ear again. His muddy fingers were stained mahogany, and he supposed the back of his ear probably looked something like a seeping volcano. At this moment, the scab was infected. "How big do you suppose it is, Mal?" Benjamin asked. "I told you, I don't suppose anything," Mallory snapped. "Haven't you got a revolver in your truck, boy?" Benjamin shook his head and said, "Just the roofing materials." Benjamin placed the base of his palm against the oozing scab behind his ear and squinted from its sting. He held it there for a while. "Why are you so scared, Mal?" he asked, and glared at the dripping plastic brim of Mallory's hat. "It's dark down there. I'm not risking my hide if those globes turn out to be a pair of cuddling fireflies," Mallory said. "I guess you shouldn't either, in that respect." Mallory lifted his hat for a moment and pushed his water-wrinkled fingers through his thinning hair, which was sopping with a mixture of sweat and rainwater. "But what if they're valuable, like gems, or whatever?" "Or whatever?" Benjamin asked. "Luxuries." Mallory smiled for a moment, showing a silver tooth at the corner of his mouth. "And what if we let them slip when they were right at our fingertips?" He shoved a hand down the front of his pants to fix the way his clothing clung to his legs. "The only thing worse than death is letting good things fall into less deserving hands than your own," Mallory said. "Then you're going down?" Benjamin asked. "In what sense?" Mallory replied. He burped. Never mind, he quickly added, then continued with, "You know, kid, you ask a lot of questions. That's the best way to learn, isn't it?" Benjamin replied. "From questions? It's the best way to learn how to dig yourself your grave." Mallory showed his teeth in a grand smile and said, "Bring me that nail gun in the back of the truck. You remembered to bring it, right?" Benjamin did remember, and reluctantly, he brought it to Mallory. "You wait at the lip of this hole, you understand?" Mallory said, testing the nail gun on one of the wooden wall panels of the barn. The animals glanced over at Mallory and sighed. Mallory slipped down into the hole and some pebbles followed him down for the first few steps of his descent. "What happened to this one?" the doctor asked one of the nurses. She explained, "He was found on the side of the road with his head buried in his steering wheel and the horn blaring." She knew he was staring at her tightly covered breasts. They were frequent clients to each other's novelties. "And he was unconscious," she added. "Well, of course he was unconscious." The doctor laughed and smiled a bit. "So what specifically killed him? Trauma from the accident, or what?" "Look here," the nurse said, and turned the corpse on its side. There was a large pulsing crater on the back of his head. "Sepsis." The doctor said, and his eyebrows rose. "Interesting." "Yes," the nurse replied and nodded after a short, awkward moment of silence. "Well, I want to take a closer look at this one," the doctor said, and gripped the side of the metal gurney. "Oh, and bring me any identification, or belongings that this man may have had with him." And he began rolling the corpse on an almost expense-free ride down the white blanketed halls of the hospital. "Doctor," the nurse said. She was still following him. "Aren't you interested in the other one?" "Other one?" the doctor said. "Well, wheel him in," he said. He rotated his wrist around in an almost mocking way, signaling to the nurse to hurry up. "Time isn't at our disposal to waste, dear." The doctor winked. "You'll have to come down and see him where he is," she replied. She stuffed her hands in either of her coat pockets. The intercom blared. "What?" The doctor released the gurney from his grip and frowned at her. "Why?" Well," she said, "he's sort of been divided into many pieces." Credit to Ian who took post views, 2,377. Please wait. We laughed and laughed about it for weeks. The whole idea of it was just blasphemy. It was like a bad horror movie escaped out of a $2 bin at the Lucky's gas station and made its way to reality. They called him the carrier, and as soon as the Jacob Monroe video hit YouTube, the gossip spread like wildfire. The security video of a little boy's abduction was far from normal, a black-winged, human-like creature bombing to the ground at such a velocity it made the ground beneath his feet crack. In one swift move, the being used one talon-like hand to get a firm grip on the boy's head, and used the other to slice his neck like a stick of butter. There was a long screech, enough to cut the video out for a second, but when it got back, gone, leaving only the boy's scream to be lost in the sky and a thin, spindly trail of blood falling straight down. The beast soared to the sky, claiming the first victim visible to be visible to the public eye. Carrie Mom was the account that uploaded the Monroe abduction. It was the only video he posted, and soon after it hit headlines the video was taken down. Soon after that the account got removed. I never thought much of it. I tended to stay away from all of the bullshit myths people talk about. This one was different though. This one took me off guard. Mainly because it looked too real. The kid, his screams. It seemed real. Then again, technology was magical. Anything could be faked. I mean, come on. This kind of shit is just a stupid story, right? That was my exact thought before the day of October 17, 2008. 2 months after the Monroe abduction had run its popularity course and everyone kinda forgot about it. A few mentions every now and again, but nowhere near as much as before. Anyway, as I was leaving for school I noticed a box on my front porch, a gift box, a nice, neat box wrapped in metallic purple paper with yellow ribboning. No address, no note, just a gift box. I was already late, and didn't think much of it. So I left it sitting there and went on my way. I came home to a fairly bizarre sight. I was taking my usual route through the Brander Mill paths when I heard a scream. A familiar scream. I arrived into my neighborhood and glanced up at my house. I had to do a double take, but I saw my mother outside vomiting profusely. I started to run, worried about what was happening. I asked her what was wrong, but she couldn't talk. She was barely clenching on the gasps of air. All she did was point to the box. Hesitating, I walked up to the already opened box to see a truly grisly sight. I stepped back in horror as I made out what the hell it was. After a second I instantly knew, and I was more horrified at the realization. It was my neighbor's 2 cats. They were dead. It wasn't that specifically that mortified me, it was that the cats had both its head removed, and grotesquely stitched to the other cat's neck. Of vice versa. With heads. It took a minute to put into perspective what had exactly happened. At the time, I thought it was just a sick, twisted idea of a prank. But, I understand now. More on that later though. The vision of the sick sight burned into my skull, and after that my life became a constant battle. I was always frightened. I went on with the war in my head for a long period of time. I don't really know how long to be exact. I started to get better. I thought I was. I knew I was. But then my first encounter happened. And I will never forget that night. I had just gotten done with my baseball practice. I just remember being happy, walking home without fear. I then heard a loud scream. A child. He was wailing, blubbering like a baby. I was running to see what was happening when I saw him. Looked no older than 9, he was tied tight to a large tree trunk, and crying heavily. But it was strange. He looked straight up, nowhere else. Just up, waiting, crying. Out of the blue I heard a loud snap. Loud enough to make me cringe, like a bone being snapped in 2. I winced, then looked back at the boy. He broke his upward stare to look at what had just appeared. A waving body flowing with the wind. She was a woman, tied by her hands and strung up by a tree branch. I heard vague muffles, but the boy had nothing blinding his mouth, and there was no one else there. The woman was alive, desperately writhing to get free. At this point, the boy started to wail again when he was interrupted by what sounded like a thunderbolt striking a foot away. It was so loud it blew me off my feet. I looked up, and saw what I hadn't seen in years. The carrier, standing straight up, looking at the boy, mocking his fear. He turned towards the woman, whose muffled cries were easily made out at this point. I should have ran, but I was paralyzed. I never got up when I fell, just watched. Watched as the creature, with one movement of his abnormal hand, snapped the woman's neck like a toothpick. He cut her binds with one movement of his hand, then dropped her. The boy screamed. I knew instantly who she was. It was his mother, who had just lost her life to this sick being. The carrier was grinning ear to ear, content with his kill. He started to walk back to the boy when he stopped, dead in his tracks. He turned his head towards me, and looked. Stared into me with his hollow, non-existent eyes. He wasn't smiling anymore, but a subtle laugh pelted out of his sharp teeth. I still couldn't move. He slowly turned back to the boy. That's when I ran. I was about 10 feet away when I heard the shriek. The shriek of victory by the beast, who with one jump, entered the sky with his fresh kill. I looked back and noticed he didn't take the body of the mother, only the kid. I was too frightened to care, as I turned around, and ran. And ran. And ran. It's been a year and a half since I witnessed the murder of the boy and his son. I took a break from this to try and cope, but it's only been getting worse. I keep seeing him, just peering at me through my window. I keep getting packages on my front porch. There's been 7 ever since the first one. I haven't opened one and never will. I know what he's trying to do. From all the data I've calculated, every victim of mysterious disappearance in the Virginia area who were seen before their disappearance had experienced some sort of traumatic event. Something to induce them with fear. That's the only way he can strike. The 2 dead cats? I think he was planning something, don't know how his plan failed. The boy in the woods. The carrier killed his mother before him, to pump him with fear before killing him. I have no idea if this is correct, but I refuse to leave my house. I see him once a day, every day. Sometimes more than once. But he only looks. Waiting for me to fear. I know better than to fear him, but I don't know how much longer I can. I can feel myself losing my sanity. I haven't had a full night's sleep since the murders. I can't eat a full meal without vomiting. And I keep having delusions. I see the boy in my house sprawled out on the couch, dead. On the floor, dead. It varies. Same with the mother. It's the carrier. I don't know if there's more of them. But I pray for anyone who encounters him, please, stay safe. I have a feeling it's too late for me as of now. P.S. I wasn't going to share this, but I feel it's my obligation to warn everyone. Before they turn into prey as well. Recently, whenever I wake up there's strange, most of the time completely illegible markings on paper. I wake up with pen ink all over my hands, and it's written in pen every time. I think, no, I'm sure I'm doing this. In my sleep, it's part of my delusions. There's only 3 that have ever made any sense to me. The rest are just scribbles. I've seen similar side effects from the mythical creature Slenderman. If anyone can inform me about what this shit is about, please email me. I can't take this anymore. I've included photos of the 3 papers and my best interpretation of all of them. Please, help me. The first legible message I received, or wrote, it says the wings know no mercy. I think it's pretty obvious, the carrier is a dangerous creature who shows no sign of hospitality. There's tears and holes in the paper, I haven't a clue why those are there. The second one. The message states it is time to ascend. With wings dripping blood around the text. I'm guessing it's a message to me saying time to die maybe? I don't know. It shows a boy tied to a tree, which is a flashback to the murders I witnessed. He's trying to fear me still. The paper's sides are ripped in various places as well. Also, on the bottom left corner, it says Otanwavai. I have a feeling I can interpret it, but I'm too afraid to at risk of my well-being. The image here was the last legible marking I got. It's a head and wings with a sinister grin, that of which I saw during the murders. The eyes are cut out of the paper. The text reads "Fear the sky." It soars into the sky with its victims. That's all I can really think of, everything else I don't understand. Credit to Luke Mullard. Post views, 2648. Please wait. The screen flickered as a man typed his story into the computer. His mind was racing, and so was his heart. He wanted the world to know as soon as possible about what he had discovered, what lay ahead. What nearly ended his life. As he typed, he turned his head every now and then as though he was expecting something to attack him. His paranoid thoughts kept getting the best of him as he turned in a frantic movement, only to see the dark of his room. The power was out, for some odd reason he didn't know. This only added to the fear he had. The shadows that came from the objects in his room made him feel crowded and small. He felt scared. He felt weak. He felt alone. A loud bang came from the hallway of his house. The sound of metal pots clanging together filled his ears. He started to type faster and more frantically, so people could be aware of this thing. It was in vain. He had finished the first few paragraphs, but his fear got to him and he could not continue. Instead, he hid in the darkest part of his room, covered. Hoping, praying that this thing didn't find him. He saw what it had done to others. He knew what would happen to him. And he knew that his chances of living were small. As he hid, he heard the breathing from this thing get closer, and he could hear their footsteps reaching his room. The door creaked open, and a small light from the candles he had placed shone into the room. He heard the door slam behind it, and the footsteps walked towards the computer. Something smashed against the wall directly above him. The object fell on his head and made a loud cracking sound. Though he was in a concussion now, he realized, with anguish and shock, that it was his computer. He heard the footsteps walk closer toward him, the heavy dragging of its feet reaching closer and closer. His breathing grew more frantic and heavy as his head throbbed in pain. The footsteps stopped right in front of where he was hiding, and then he heard no more. almost as though it had vanished. He slowly pushed away the objects that hid him and opened his eyes. At first, he saw nothing. He felt relieved and let out a sigh. He jumped in shock as he heard a small chuckle from behind him. As this man turned, he uttered out a scream, but never finished. He was completely silenced from then on. His throat was slashed to keep him from screaming. His stomach was torn open and his internal organs were pulled out. The thing that tore him open opened a pouch and added his organs to an already stuffed bag, filled with various body parts. Before the man passed out, the thing stomped on his head with its ugly foot. His skull was smashed into bits. One of the quickest deaths it has done. The next morning, there was no trace of him. No blood, no body parts, not even the broken computer. He had simply vanished. I witnessed this event from my house next door, and I know that soon, it will come for me. It comes for anyone that knows of it. To the next person to read about him. To the next person that read its story, to the person that reads this. You. Good luck, my friend. For as I type this, my own time runs out. Credit to Brandon 4117 post views, 2694. Please wait. Today, I drove my 7-year-old son James into town to go Halloween shopping. I didn't have to buy any candy this year because we live in a cul-de-sac out in the middle of a farming community on the outskirts of the city. I moved last year because I had divorced my wife and lost my old house along with custody of James. It's rather the shit end of the stick, but James and I love Halloween. It's one of the few times a year that Tracy finds it acceptable for my only son to come visit me. James stays with her on every other holiday throughout the year, his birthday, and everything else in between. I get to see him only on my birthday and the week preceding Halloween, unless the high bitch court finds it suitable for him to come spend the night every once in a while. HMPH. Frankly, I'm surprised she let him come shopping with me. Upon perusing the aisles, James showed a strong affinity to a flamboyantly green and purple Buzz Lightyear costume. It's really typical for a kid to have an eye for the most expensive thing on the rack, but I didn't have the heart to say no to those bottomless blue eyes. He also picked out all the house decorations. I know we won't be getting any trick-or-treaters out where I live, but adorning the exterior of our home was always one of our favorite things to do together. Friday, October 21st. It looks like James and I will be having some competition for the Best Halloween Decorations Award, which sadly, in this neighborhood, is only a pat on the back. When I lived with James and my ex-wife, he and I won the trophy every year since he was 3. Reminiscence aside, my next-door neighbor is really giving us a run for our money. He did quite the splurge on decorations. He must have ordered everything online because aside from the cliché Happy Halloween banners and the like, the festive treasures found on his house and lawn were nowhere to be seen in the store where James and I shopped, which sold only festive decor. The fellow's garage door sat below a strand of kite string on which hung dozens of expensive-looking bones and skulls. He also placed several other bones sticking straight up out of his lawn. There was no color or detail, just random bones placed here and there, strewn about his unkempt lawn. Truly, though, he's nothing. Saturday, October 22nd. While walking through my house at dusk, outside the dining room window I noticed a quick flicker of movement dash in and out of my peripherals as I was preparing for James's week-long stay. I inspected. I don't even know if I should be glad that I did. I walked back in front of the window and saw the same animation, but this time in the center of my vision. I walked back away from the window, and slowly, I peeked out from the corner of the glass. I made out the shape of the very top of a person's head peering over the top of my fence, and it seemed to be watching me. Whoever it was ducked down again right after they realized we had made eye contact. I backed away from the window. I don't know why. I crawled over to the family room window, which was about 15-20 feet to the left, but facing the same direction as the dining room window. I stayed knelt, timidly but curiously grasping the curtain. I ever so slowly pulled back the cloth, only to gaze upon the masked fellow who was snooping around behind my property. This time, I saw his entire head. The mask had a gaping, dangling mouth, similar to the mask used in the Scream series. The only difference was that the jaw of this particular mask was swaying about in the wind, and it also had a teeth. Long, thin, fang-like growths that appeared almost like the strands hanging from the mouth of a whale, though fewer in number. The expression on the mask was plain, and the color was rather pale, with slight gray discoloration. It didn't have a goofy smile or an intimidating stare, just a mouth hanging wide open and a couple of perfectly round, beady little chameleon eyes eerily shaded. After about 10 seconds of observation, one of the eyes appeared as if it was steadily drifting off away from where it was fixated, and very slowly began to scan to the left, and as soon as he seemed to lock on to where I was, he quickly disappeared. Tuesday, October 25th. I don't really know my neighbor, much less where he gets all of his decorations. I noticed a new ornament of sorts in front of his door today. It was a ceramic bowl full of guts, comically placed where he would place a bowl of candy were he too lazy to answer the door for trick-or-treaters. Behind it was a large white piece of paper bound to the wall of his house. On it was written in nearly illegible chicken scratch, "Take one." The whole sign had bloody fingerprints smeared all over it. More convincing yet was the bloody tape. And the bloody wall. Nearly the entire wall was smeared in brownish red. Spooky. The streams of blood that ran from the handprints were, strangely enough, dry. I didn't know they made novelty blood that could dry like that. I've only ever spoken to this guy once, and it was around the time that I moved. He seemed rather distraught. As I approached him, I asked if everything was alright. He said that he was late for work, which was odd, because it was around 8:30 at night. I asked him where he worked, and he revealed to me that he was a biologist and worked at the military base, with no other details. It was strange. Every time I saw him after that encounter, his pants had traveled up his ankles another centimeter. Midlife growth spurt, I guess. He was henceforth stumbling around awkwardly and tripping over himself. My other neighbors and I mocked him from time to time. I remember one specific instance when he was watering his shrubbery, and one of his knees gave out, backwards. Kind of like a large bird's leg. A pelican, or perhaps a heron. It looked excruciating to me, but he just walked it off. I've only ever seen him outside again once after this display, but it was months ago. And last month, as I walked to the mailbox late one afternoon, I heard his kids crying frantically. Screaming, almost. It continued into the evening. The noise stopped eventually, though. I was having trouble sleeping through that horrifying racket. I sincerely hope he had his parenting privileges revoked. However, I've never even seen his kids. Let's hope he's only an uncle. Wednesday, October 26th. Ever since James arrived earlier this week, he has simply abhorred the idea of removing his costume. Little Buzz has been running rampant throughout the house quoting Toy Story. He hasn't disrobed once since he put it on, save for when I demanded he allow me to wash it because he was quite literally rolling around outside in the dirt. I haven't seen any more of this weirdo in the mask lately. Probably some mischievous kid from the neighborhood behind mine. It's a cul-de-sac too, just a bigger one. There is a dirt road that accompanies an irrigation canal separating the two neighborhoods. My house is the farthest house from the main road, and the canal runs parallel to my fence. I don't know of any bridge he could have used to come across, but I never look back there, and I don't particularly care to. Neighbor man bought a new ornament, 200 feet of lights to accompany the 200 feet of intestines he had previously thrown all over the tree in his front yard. The lights coexist uniquely with the prior decor, though. All I could smell when I went outside was the burning odor of the sizzling ensemble of mix-matched decorations hanging from the tree. The moisture of those oddly genuine-looking innards had adhered to his archaic festive bulbs, producing a deep red glow. Intentional or not, the smell was almost enough to coerce a complaint out of me. Almost. Come to think of it, the smell wasn't so bad. Almost like a barbecue. Friday, October 28th. I'm going insane. No simple words can properly describe what I believe I have witnessed. As the sun was setting this evening, I got another glimpse of this masked man. What I saw now was not at all what I would describe as a mask. I was sitting in my living room reading. The bay window in my living room overlooks the entire street, and I had my blinds open. I had startled and looked up and out the window toward the nearly dissipated sun because I had heard what sounded like an asthmatic man gasping for air through a megaphone over top of a vocal, "Thou shalt love thy demon, for he hath damned thine self to the soul of thee. Waste not this gift of sacrifice, and purge in the flames of mercy." The corridors of the hotel still had the smell of laundry detergent and disinfectant. This smell, however, was obscured greatly by the overwhelming stench of ash. 3 months ago there was a kitchen fire that quickly spread to the rest of the prestigious hotel, and rather than try to rebuild or renovate, the owners thought it better to simply collect the insurance money and sell the property. No one died in the fire, but that doesn't mean there aren't any ghosts to haunt these charred halls. It wasn't difficult to get into the place, about as hard as ducking under some yellow caution tape and kicking in a locked door. There were plenty of windows on the second floor that I could have reached with ease, but something told me that they had been used recently and that they should be avoided. The entrance I used wasn't even safe. 3 steps into the building and I nearly got my leg caught in a bear trap. Obviously, someone wanted intruders to be wounded or killed for their curiosity, and for that reason I resolved to proceed with utmost caution. I pulled out a flashlight from my trench coat and began my search, the shadows dancing around the cone of white light before me. The first girl was found dead about a week ago, floating in a lake, her skin gray and sagging away from muscle. Degloving. Morticians call it. The forensic guys on the news said that she had been dead for about 3 days, her throat slashed open and joints broken at sharp angles. The reason she was floating was because her lungs and stomach had not been flooded with water and the skin slippage around her ankle allowed her corpse to loosen itself from the cinder block that had been weighing her down. The next day when the lake was trenched for more evidence, 3 more girls were discovered at the bottom, each in a state of decay that could make even a sewage worker vomit. The city panicked. There was a killer on the loose, every man a suspect, every woman a potential victim. A curfew was implemented, and the police were scrambling to find any information on who this boogeyman was. How I managed to track this sick bastard to the hotel, well, that was just pure luck. My main hobby is photography. Specifically, I like to take pictures of urban decay when the weather permits, usually at night. Rarely I use the flash, as I prefer to set the shutter to its slowest speed to allow the maximum amount of light to imprint the film. There are other technical procedures I use for the lens adjustments and the tripod, but that's irrelevant to anyone but me. I had just finished up a series of photographs of some abandoned farmhouses on the outskirts of town and had decided to move on to the fire-damaged hotel. Well, that, and the police asked me to stay away from the farmhouses after the bloated girl was found. They suspected that a condemned house just outside of town would be the perfect place for the killer to hide, and they wanted to stake out a few locations which turned up some potential evidence. So I moved on to the hotel. The first night I got some decent shots of the outside perspective, style, outside broad shot, outside looking in, and last a shot of the inside looking out. The pictures came out great. I loved the way the smoke stains leaked from the 6th floor windows, and I was getting ready to move in for a closer view when I saw him. Climbing into the 6th floor window from the fire escape, was a large man in a brown coat carrying a duffel bag. From where I was I could tell that he was about 6 feet tall, muscular but with a slight paunch. A white guy with a shaved head. I decided against staying to finish my work, not with some strange man roaming around the place, and I had planned to return later in the week. That was a promise that I managed to keep. At the time, though, it never occurred to me that I saw the face of a monster. Not until tonight. Tonight was the night that I had intended to return. About 15 minutes ago I was prepping my gear to finish the photo run, when the weather report on TV was interrupted by a breaking news flash of a girl being forced into her own car at gunpoint outside of the department store where she worked. A co-worker managed to get a brief description of the kidnapper and promptly called 911. She told the police, a tall white male with a bald head wearing a brown coat jumped out from behind a tree and threw no name into the passenger seat. As I heard the report, I got a deep, horrible sinking feeling in the base of my gut, the slow creeping feeling that I was somehow to blame for being too stupid to spot a murderer when one sits right in front of me. I had to do something. I dropped the camera gear and instead grabbed a flashlight, my cell phone, and a meat cleaver from my kitchen. Just in case. Just in case I meet the sick piece of shit face to face. I got to the hotel about 3 minutes ago. Drove like a cheetah on crack to get here too. I parked my car a block away and sprinted the rest of the distance. Kicked in the door about a minute ago. Why didn't I call the police immediately? Well, first of all, I needed to make sure the girl was still alive, or at least here. The second reason is a little hard to explain. Maybe I have a hero complex, or maybe I just want to make sure this guy suffers adequately before the cops get to him. Or, maybe, I have some sort of demon in me that saw a chance to get out. So here I am, running as carefully as I can down a burnt hallway looking for a girl who could already be a mutilated corpse, all the while her killer could pop out from around any given corner. I start up a flight of stairs, keeping to the edges to avoid falling through. Part of stairs collapse beneath my feet, but I grab onto the railing just in time. I shimmy the rest of the way up. I'll find another way out later. Let's think, left or right? Right, down a new corridor so damaged by fire that all I see is black, so black that I almost think my flashlight went out. I taste charcoal and cough louder than I should. I hear a noise and my heart drops. I freeze in place. I don't move, I don't breath, I just listen. Then I hear it again. Not a man's voice. No, it's the muffled sob of a woman. A woman crying, alone and afraid. And I can tell that she cries only because she hasn't given up hope. I follow the sounds to a room, one of the rooms that was once used by those in need of rest and comfort. I see no light from the slit beneath the door, and I turn the knob cautiously. The slow creak of the hinges prompts more stifled screams of pain. As my light floods the room, it's her eyes I see first. Washed out and red from tears, so wide from pure terror that she looks like less of a human and more of a wild animal backed into a corner. The rest of her body is stretched naked and chained to a bed, her arms and legs covered in cuts leaking blood into the mattress. Her mouth is choked with a ball gag, and from a brief glimpse, it appears that portions of her scalp are missing. Without a shadow of a doubt, she has endured obscene agonies within this last hour. She starts snorting and struggling when she sees me, until I hush her. I'm going to help you, I say, but you need to stay quiet. She isn't calm, but she understands that her nightmare is about to end. I search the rest of the room for signs of what have you. The desk next to the bed is littered with pliers and knives, but no key. I check the bathroom, nothing. Then I notice the orange extension cord leading from the window to a pair of floodlights in the corner of the room. He brought his own light source, but why risk it? I ask myself. Turning away from the corner, I focus my attention on the closet. It was as I walked towards the closet door that the lights in the corner flickered to life. He's coming up the fire escape. Fast as lightning I fling myself into the closet while simultaneously punching 911 into my phone. I get a hold of the dispatch officer just as I close the door behind me, leaving just enough of a gap to see the bed. What is the emergency? The voice on the line asks. The missing girl from earlier tonight, she's in the Dash Hotel on the corner of Street and Dash, 6th floor, room number 5B. Send an ambulance. I rush every syllable through a hushed panic and hang up before the officer can ask any follow-up questions. I haven't heard the window open yet, so I still have surprise on my side. My heart beats like a hammer. A bead of sweat rolls down my brow. Adrenaline saturates every muscle. The tension stretches time across a slow-motion frame. Finally, after what felt like 1,000 years of waiting, I hear the window open, followed by 2 heavy footsteps, one after the other, and a short grunt. My fingers grip the handle of the cleaver, while I hold my breath. Now I can see the girl. The man is blocking my line of sight, but her agonizing noises pick up again. I want to rush him now, but there's a voice in my head telling me to wait. It's a voice, but also not a voice. More like a deep, rasping feeling of hatred. The words are unclear but the meaning is inherent. It wants me to wait for the man to move closer to the closet. I hear the clicks of padlocks, and footsteps turning towards the closet. I don't know what's in here with me, but it's something he wants. I raise the cleaver above my head, his hand reaches for the doorknob. One heartbeat. Then two. The rasp in my head screams for the moment to come. It screams for what it wants. A haze of red tears apart my vision. Heavy pants of rage, my shoulder vibrates with each hateful hack of shapen steel into bone and flesh. What remains is no longer a man, but the pathetic, failed excuse for a demon, a broken nightmare, a malfunctioned machine. There is no love here. Only speckles of blood and the aftertaste of bittersweet vengeance. But the rasp is not yet satisfied. I can hear it begging for more. Not from within either. I can hear it all around me. From the walls, the floors, and from down the hall. It's as though it were part of the building itself. I wipe the reef from my eyes. I start to smell smoke. The door I entered is too hot to open. What lies behind is burning to the ground. The fire will finish what it started. Fueled by anger, it will consume all. I look to the girl, and then towards the open window. She's still chained to the bed, and there's still no key. If I leave her here to burn, what will I become? Would I be any better than that perverted thing soaking into the carpet? If I lose what's left of my own humanity to the rasp for the sake of mercy? Well, that's no choice at all. It's a damnation of love. After my arrest, the police told me that the keys were in the closet. Credit to Stephen D. Harris. Post views 2,428. Please wait. Dear person of interest, you most likely do not know me. But I, on the other hand, know you too well. It has come to my understanding that you are of a very dangerous type of individual. I know that you spend the faceless part of your life, taking the lives of others. Now, before you become alarmed, I assure you I have no intentions of prosecuting you for what you are and what you have done. In fact, I find your hidden craft more or less beautiful, for it is the mind of the unstable that thrills my line of research. I invite you to join me for a little social experiment of sorts. All I want is to delve into the minds of the wicked and make some sense of these senseless acts. Thank you for your participation, and I cannot wait to work with you. Sincerely, Dr. Joseph Connors. One does not expect to walk into a room filled with murderers. It brings me great curiosity as to where this idea first came into being. The work of a psychiatrist is found as professional and done in neat, organized methods. I did not plan to be interviewing madmen in an underground operation while I was at medical school. But I must take the risk in order to pursue a breakthrough in mental health science. My work is not always clean, for my hands have been slightly dirtied with the types I associate with. How I came into contact with these people is something no one needs to know. What should be brought to your attention, however, is that my unorthodox methods are strictly for scientific purposes. And of course the financial benefit of being the first man to ever reveal the deep inner workings of an American serial killer. This process demanded a lot of time and care. There is no way to get results by posting a Craigslist ad looking for a group of people who are all wanted for homicide. Every step must be thought ahead, just like in a ruthless game of chess. I needed to be cautious in dealing with this unstable element known as the human mind. My intentions were to help them mend their tainted lives, and in doing so hope to boost my personal success. The timing was excellent. Have a little chat with America's most frowned upon and be back home before my fiancée, Carmen, suspects that I am not at my office, but am instead in an empty warehouse with the criminally insane. She had a reason to distrust me, but I was not about to fill her in on such a dark corner of my life. She meant the world to me, and she deserved all the best I could offer. That is partially why I carried on this secret life of night therapist. The public exploitation of personal motivations does not come cheap. And a life of wealth and minor fame is the best I can give my soon-to-be wife. You would have expected my new patients to be horrific and unjust, but in reality, they came from the same walks of life as anyone else. But still, my imagination got the best of my courage, and the first thoughts of backing down overwhelmed me. As I approached the doors to the abandoned warehouse, not only butterflies, but wasps could be felt in the pit of my stomach, beating their wings throughout my sternum as my nerves worsened. What if I had walked into a room filled with savages who want nothing more than to watch as the remainder of my miserable life spilled onto the floor? The only order of business left unsettled would be, who will kill me first? The metal door swung itself open and my questions became the answers I sought after. Placed about the room were 5 foldable chairs, forming a sort of ring. The nightly brush of cold clawed its freezing nails against my body. My pulsating veins hammered away at my flesh as the blood flowed relentlessly underneath my wretched skin. The dim light of candles gave me a sickly ambience as my eyes came into contact with 4 other pairs staring back at me. These eyes gave no emotion, but as I observed closer, the faces were made apparent. 4 masses now filled the small space, and maintained a distance of feelings. As far as I was concerned, I was looked at strange yet humane people you only meet in a rare lifetime. I set my briefcase upon the floor, took the last vacant chair and smiled at my acquaintances. Someone had to say something to break the ice and start us off. I suppose the best candidate would be me, seeing as I set this journey in motion. Why don't we start with our names and what else am I supposed to say? And your preferred method of murder? I had to say something, and in desperation I just killed the white elephant in the room. The rest of the congregation looked awkward, seeing as no one had ever so blatantly discussed the darkest crevasses of their worlds. The silence was concluded with a nod of confirmation and we began in a clockwise direction. To my left was a man with sleek jet black hair that fell into his face. His skin was sunken in and resembled more of a corpse than a living organism. His expression was aggressive and his brow was almost stuck in a cringe. His voice was harsh when he spoke. My name is Maxwell. I haven't been called that in a while, but that's my name. He stood firm and stiff with his arms crossed against his gray tank top. At this time I noticed a tattoo on his shoulder, which was a snake winding through the open mouth of a cracked skull. He startled me when he spoke again. I have killed 7 people. The past 4 times I have locked them in my basement and let them die away. Okay, we were making progress, although I needed to keep it moving along. That's very good, I said, trying to be enthusiastic. I looked to the next person to the right of the circle. She was a middle-aged woman who emanated a constant feeling of sadness. Her grayed gown left only her head as the little bit of visible flesh. Her hair was withered down and absent of any remarkable color. Hello, my name is Mrs. Victoria Graham. I can't honestly say I prefer a method of murder, but each time for me has been the same. I have a nasty habit of poisoning people and watching as the life is choked out of them. She dropped her head. It seems as if this is the first time she has ever spoken to anybody, let alone having a conversation of this kind. Once again it was the silence that propelled me to speak up. How wonderful. I think we are really making progress tonight. With that we all turned to the figure sitting across from me. It had taken me until this time to notice how unique this one looked. His eyes were coated in thick black makeup that ran down his face as if bleeding from his eyes. Barely hanging from his limbs were the torn remains of what was once a classy outfit. His button-down shirt and vest had been drenched in mud. His hair was the most remarkable feature. I could not count each of the colors dyed into his roots. Red, purple, green and yellow are all streaked through his once blonde strands of wavy hair. By far he was the most energetic and laughed at himself as he spoke. I am Nikolai. I kill people in many ways. My personal favorite is to cut out their heart under sacrificial circumstances. They bleed out so very quickly. Ha! I was utterly astonished at this individual, so creative and so very interesting. Keeping up this rhythm, I turned to the final person seating to my left within the circle. He looked up, shaking and trembling his arms and head, but then turned away quickly as if afraid. He was wearing a brown turtleneck and a pair of blue jeans. He rubbed his hands together anxiously. From in his pocket he took out a pen and notepad and scribbled something down as if his life depended on it. He hands it over to me. The content I read out loud. First it said the name Bradley and second it said, study the people, know their life and then kill them. Very well, not the most descriptive man I know, I figured we could work on that later. I began to explain my intentions and personal goals to be accomplished within the time we had together. They did not comment, yet I could tell that they understood what I was meaning to say. We carried out our business in a surprisingly well-fashioned formation. They responded well and showed so much potential. I needed to keep them engaged, however. I did not want to lose their attention so early on. I asked another set of questions. Who they were, what they do and where they came from. This was so very generic, so very boring when you get right down to it. It was necessary I know more about the internal taboo that each of them possessed. If you could, tell me about your most memorable homicide. With this I wanted to get them thinking, get it personal. They each replied shockingly well. Very simple answers to such a deep question. Maxwell went first. This housewife, I did not know her. But she seemed so perfect. She married rich, so life came just peachy for her. She had kids, I believe, 3 of them, and a husband, but I didn't care. I knew she would be a great victim of mine. This was all said with no remorse, no sympathy. He is truly a man with no regard for the value of human life. Next was Victoria, who smiled for the first time. He was this politician. Such a high and mighty man of society. I felt it my personal responsibility to bring down the ignorance he spewed from his words. So with detailed preparation I poisoned his coffee before his big re-election speech. I sat in the audience and watched him choke and gag every vile fluent from within him. Suddenly I felt excited with how real and authentic these people were and how much their deeds signified. I looked to the almost raccoon-looking eyes of Nikolai. He could hardly talk between his laughter. I killed a police officer. He was as much a pig as a human being. He abused the law for his own sick amusement. It was more like putting down a sick animal than a person. I took his unconscious mass to an old crypt. He was strapped down to a tomb when I cut him first. He was too lifeless to make any noise when his heart was beating out of his chest. I tried hard not to become nauseated with his comment. I kept myself together, because I was here to learn from, not be squeamish, about these horror stories. Bradley wrote from his journal again. For the entirety of the meeting no one had heard him speak more than a word or two. The note handed to me was paraphrased from real sentences, so I tried to piece it together as I read to the others. Beautiful young girl. She worked for a company, a mortgage, I remember. I followed her home one night. She was walking from the gym like every night. I caught her and killed her in the park. I looked to him and smiled. He faintly replied with a smirk. Tonight was a good night. Like all things in this world, our meeting came to an end. Within one simple gathering I have a feeling of total connection and safety with these patients of mine. As insane as it sounds looking back, I was glad to say they were a part of my life. We each adjourned with the simple promise to return tomorrow night and continue our vibrant discussions. Home now in my bed, sitting next to the love of my life, I could not wait for tomorrow. The images of the mind's eye are known to haunt the lives of those who dream them. The fragments of our peculiar imagination dwells within our hearts. So in what way am I disturbed tonight? What has conjured the dreadful beast that scours my petty soul? My body is weak as fear provokes me, as terror submerges me and as nightmares become seemingly real. Shuddering as I awoke, the brightening sun illuminated my bedroom. Within my daze I crawled out from my covers. Carmen had already woken out of her sleep and by the smell of it, making breakfast. My head began to ache as my body lurched down the stairs. I cleared my eyes one last time and I was met with the smile of my future bride. I clumsily smiled back as if a schoolboy. She laughed and continued about her morning routine. So, how did you sleep last night? She asks. The words echo through the corners of my brain. I reply, good, gritting my teeth from the painful lie. I have been meaning to talk to you about the wedding, she continues, it is coming up you know, and we haven't had much chance to discuss, with you being so busy and all. I looked blank and expressionless as I prepared myself, for it was normal me who asked all of the questions. Sure sweetheart, what should we talk about first? I took a seat at the kitchen table while she performed her craft amongst the dishes and pans. I need to know who you are inviting, so I can get invitations out accordingly. Seeing as I have hardly made a friend in my life, I just told her my mother and father is all I wished to attend. What about your family? I asked. I felt slightly puzzled because when I came to think of it, I had never once heard about her family nor have I ever met them. She looked troubled but keeps herself firm. Honey, she goes on, thinking of the best way to put this, my family is dead. I haven't told you because I didn't think it much of an appropriate conversation at the time. I am in a confused awe. Why had I not known this before now? I searched my thoughts for the correct words, yet I feel as though I have failed to find a perfect response. How did they die? This I said, and another white elephant dead on the ground with a stupid remark. She looked emotional, but I could see that she was strong and had long made some form of peace with this situation. They were all killed or murdered, I should say. All on different occasions. She now seemed fully prepared to handle this conversation. I had a mother, a father, a brother and a sister. All of them are dead due to homicide. I fished for another question. What did they do in life? I asked. My father was a politician, my mother kept up the house, my brother was a cop and my sister worked for the mortgage company. I needed answers. There is no possible way this added up. I just now came into contact with 4 serial killers, all proclaiming the murders of my fiancé's family. I am behind the wheel of my car, not paying any attention to the road, but on the fact that I associate myself with potential maniacs. Sweating and breathing heavily, I realize that tonight is going to be one hell of a group discussion. It's 9 p.m. I am still seated in the driver's seat of my car. I am parked right outside my destination, the warehouse. I stared at it coldly, mesmerizing myself in its wickedness. It is time. I stepped out onto the gravel and marched myself towards the big steel door. I honestly had no idea what to expect, but I knew it is going to be far from a pretty sight. The door swung open, leading me into the solemn room. That one glowing candle made its mark upon the floor, and encircling this one candle were 5 empty chairs. My pace quickened and my heartbeat increased. I reached the circle but found a complete absence of everything from the night before. Everything except a handgun and a letter addressed to a OneDrive. Joseph Connors was found bestowed upon my former chair. I split open the envelope and unfolded the letter for me to read. It was in Bradley's handwriting and it read, "Home is where the heart is, doctor. So you better go and save her." Ha. 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 Back in my car, driving faster than I was meant to be going, the gun in my lap and the letter clenched tightly in my whitening knuckles. I needed to make things right. I swear to God, if they hurt her, I needed to stay calm, even in a time like this. Even faster than I expected, I was pulling into the driveway of my humble abode. "Carmen!" I shouted, praying for any response. I cracked open the front door and stormed inside. The lights were dim and flickering from a power surge of some kind. I traveled towards the kitchen and discover another letter placed upon the counter. Much like the first, it was from Bradley and it read, "She is in a safe place, Dr. Connors, but I implore you to think ahead and mind your actions." I took the paper, crumpled it and threw towards my feet. It was dead silent as I began to sob. The gun was still placed well in my grasp. I stood still and listened. From behind me I heard the floorboards creak and the faint whisper of, "Honey, what's?" I turned around and through a natural impulse of anxiety. Bang! The mass of darkness before me fell to the ground. A pool of blood crept from its shadows. I dropped the gun and rushed to the freshly slain corpse. With a closer look I recognized the face. My heart sank to the lowest possible level and I screamed in horror. She laid there with a wound through her chest. Home really is where the heart is, seeing as hers was now splattered against the wall. "Carmen, my dear sweet Carmen. She is dead." Where else could I go? What else could I do? I was now wanted for murder, the murder of my precious soon-to-be wife. I had to flee the scene of the crime, my crime. I was exploding down the highway, looking for a sanctuary to wash my bloody hands. There was but one place I could think to go. The metal door swung itself open and my questions became the answers I sought after. Placed about the room were 5 foldable chairs, forming a sort of ring. The nightly brush of cold clawed its freezing nails against my body. My pulsating veins hammered away at my flesh as the blood flowed relentlessly underneath my wretched skin. The dim light of candles gave me a sickly ambience as my eyes came into contact with 4 other pairs staring back at me. These eyes gave no emotion, but as I observed closer, the faces were made apparent. 4 masses now filled the small space, and maintained a distance of feelings. As far as I was concerned, I was looked at strange yet humane people you only meet in a rare lifetime. I set my handgun upon the floor, took the last vacant chair and smiled at my acquaintances. This time it was 5 patients seeking a refuge from a troubled past. No longer was I their doctor, but an equal of sorts. I became the same breed as them. We now formed a group of individuals that shared the same title of vicious killer. In agreement, we all nodded our heads and began our next session. The circle was complete once again. End credit to Pierce Matthew Mora. Post views 3,683. Please wait. And that's because you're a spoiled brat, says my mother. You know, it's not great knowing that your parents' last words toward you were pretty damn harsh, but whatever, you know? I got out of there, once and for all, so I wouldn't have to deal with the crap school, the crap cops and so on. Just because I see what goes on when no one else is looking doesn't mean that I'm insane. I didn't wish this upon myself and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone else. This plague, it comes on daily. I start feeling sick and I see things that are hard at work trying to make me and everyone else miserable. I've seen them cause death, sickness, accidents, small injuries, a cut from the razor my father was shaving with. I wouldn't call them imps, but some creatures that don't like being seen. I think they like me for some reason. They like to smell me. I don't like for them to be near me. They sometimes poke at my ribs and nod their heads or shake them and squabble amongst each other. Anyways, I wanted to tell anyone I can about how these little devils work. And how my mother's and others' stories have ended. Because I'm sure that I don't have much more time than enough to write this. They're getting violent. After a while of looking at them and studying them, they look kind of like little humans. Only more violent and prone to pranks on us. When stepped on they'll trip you. When their pranks are brushed off easily they'll progress to more brutal ones. I've learned to avert their gazes more than I used to, because there's ways to avoid even death if you know how these things work. They go for reactions from us. The more surprised we are the happier they are. So for example, if you trip and just keep walking, they'll trip you when you're carrying something heavy later. I've seen that happen a few times. Ugh, they're getting matches to burn down my shelter. At least they can't see me yet. Look, heed my words. If something small bad happens to you without explanation, you might want to provide a bit more of a reaction than you would think to. It may save your life. And look, I think I'll be writing to the living from the dead here, so I'll make this quick. Danny, I mean Dad, I love you, I always have, and I'm sorry for not showing it. Brianna, you have my heart even in death, and no, I did not commit suicide. I know you think I was insane and all. But I don't want you following in my footsteps into the world beyond either. To my sister and cousins, I believe that Brianna and Eric should be married. I hope the kid grows up good, and that you guys can keep your life above the influence and on the path of your God. Ethan, I know for damn sure that you and I, and your brothers shared blood. Stay proud of that. Now for the final part of this little testament of mine. My mother and I were in a fight. She claimed that I was a stubborn brat and that I was only seeing these things to get attention. See, that's where they got real excited. Kind of angered, but more excited. They knew that someone knew they were there, and I got that horrible feeling again. She went to grab a kitchen knife from a drawer to finish cutting the fish, and those little fuckers made her drop it and tripped her. She landed with the knife centered in her throat. I couldn't take any more of this. I had to take those bastards with me. I grabbed the knife and slashed at a few of them. It didn't work. Their bodies mended back together, but they were insulted and decided that I had to go with my mother. Not before I could get to my room and lock the door. Funny how weak the little things are all together. But I couldn't just stay there until they went away or I rotted. I had to run. I ran for days. I got away from most of them, but they're scattered everywhere. The few that I tried to kill found me. Tried to kill me, but I got away again. I created a small shelter against them. Used my fists and a couple of walls made from wooden poles to protect myself. They don't like resistance. They got a little timid for a while, but then decided to dig me out, and they've created a cooking pit. I think it's for me. They've realized that I'm not in the shelter. Okay, I'm going to face them. If anyone finds this, transport it back to 501, Quail Hill, Hamlet, North Carolina. Thank you, and watch for signs. If you notice them, try to spread this word. I know it sounds crazy. Probably because I'm a spoiled brat. Credit to Turquoise Post Views, 2,499. Please wait. I'm bawling my eyes out as I type this, locked in my closet. For those of you who think this is one of those internet ghost stories, then I envy you. After this you can just continue on with your lives, but it will catch up with you soon enough. And it's your fault for reading this. Don't try and stop now, it's too late. But if you read on, you might be able to defend those around you, get away from your loved ones. Don't tell anybody. Embrace death. My story, and soon to be yours, started early in the morning. I checked my mail to find bills, junk and a small package. I opened the padded envelope from the bottom and a flash drive fell out. I picked it up after it bounced onto my mat. What's this? I wondered aloud as I examined it. It was a plain, black USB stick. I asked my wife in the kitchen if she has ordered anything, but she was just as puzzled about the drive as me. I looked up at the clock. I was almost late for work. I put the mail on the table and dashed out the door. When I arrived at the office, I kept wondering about what could be on the flash drive. Was it some marketing idea? A prank that just contained some stupid video? I decided to check it out once I got home. The day seemed to drag after that, as I curious to find out what was on that stick. When I finally arrived home, I found my wife's body in bloody ribbons across the living room floor. I was about to scream hysterically, when I noticed a faint glow. I turned to see my wife's laptop turned on with a blank screen. With tears in my eyes, I crossed the room, over the bloody mess on the floor, to the computer. I tapped the spacebar and the screen lit up. There was a file named torture.av in a folder named removable disk E. I looked down, and sure enough the USB stick was in the USB port. Without thinking, I clicked on the file. A video automatically started playing. A black and white video of a 7, maybe 8-year-old girl in a bed. After 20 seconds or so the girl suddenly sits up in bed. Her eyes snap open, revealing wide, pea-green orbs. Her body hovers a few feet into the air, then an earth-shattering scream issues from her mouth. It sounds inhuman, not even animalistic. It is the scream of something too sinister to even register. Suddenly the scene is a street that looks familiar to me. The cameraman walks down the street until he reaches a house that also seems familiar to me. Suddenly, my heartbeat quickens. My mouth turns dry as I realize that the cameraman is walking up the path to my door. I jump as there's a knock on my door. I look through the frosted glass and I see a dark hooded figure. Without realizing it, my legs are carrying me through my hallway. As I was locking the door of my bedroom, I heard my front door being flung off the hinges. I barricaded the door as best I could and grabbed my laptop. I climbed into this very closet and here I am about to die. I know that. I can hear whoever or whatever the thing is banging down my door right now. I just wanted to tell my story before I pass. Soon, you will receive the same flash drive. Do not watch it. Dispose of it. Oh God, it's in the room. It's in the room. It's in the room. It's I. Credit to, this is my first creepypasta. And yes, I realize I have used a videotape cliché, but I just wanted to write something. Please criticize on what I need to work on. Post views, 4,660. Please wait. It is so dark in here, so dreadfully dark. I have come to hate this darkness, for it comes much too frequently. My body is still, as if numbed. The motion I can sense, as I am being carried away, is quick-paced and very rough. Where I am is unknown, but I do know that I am surrounded by a wall of almost fabric-like linings. My imprisoned state is positioned ever so close to this man's heart. I can feel its sickly thumps as my bearer strides so vigorously. His breath comes in impulsive, distorted inhales as he sucks for the God-given right to stay alive. I pity him, for it is he who depends on me to do the task at hand. I have become a tool in giving reality to his twisted fantasies. I suppose we must rely on each other, for it is I who fulfills the wishes of the scandalous and he brings meaning and purpose to my creative design. But now the moment has come, the moment I have relived time and time again in the hands of this cruel-minded gentleman. His motion ceases but his heart rate increases. He reaches into his coat pocket and unsheathes me from my hiding place. Free from the burdens of my senseless cell, I can now feel the sting of the cold night breeze. My metallic body gleams in the pale light of the overhead moon as it casts its undying rays upon the earthly neighbors below. All else maintains the pitch black that mortal men have come to fear, the uncertainty that waits behind the veil of their blinded eyes. Footsteps now echo down this lonely path. Little does this person know, they have just entered a game of hide-and-go-seek in which the loser meets a painful end. My cohort and I have fiendishly placed ourselves behind this unforgiving wall. It seems our victim has been deemed the unknowing seeker. The sound of this person's presence draws more near to where my master stands, who is still clutching me within his firm grasp. Before I could even brace myself for impact, out sprang the villain with sinister precision of his killing blow. I met the fair lady's soft and fleshy chest. I could tell it was a woman because of the shrill, feminine scream that managed to escape her tightening throat. My steel-pointed end tore through her oh so easily. I merely slipped right in between her blockade of muscle, tissue and bone. All came to a stop. I could recognize where I was now. I was buried inside the now split-open heart of the unlucky maiden. I could feel the frantic beats as blood attempted to flee the shattering impact I had made. Such a beautiful muscle, trying so hard to squeeze out every bit of life it could. I swear I can almost hear it praying to the heavens above before it stopped beating completely. When the deed was done and my purpose served, I was drawn back from her chest and I watched as blood spilled down her magnificent left breast. Down she fell towards the ground, unable to live yet unable to die, caught between this world and the hell that awaited her. I did not know whether I should be in despair for her, seeing as now her fluids coat my razor's edge. With a handkerchief I am wiped and stripped clean of her meaninglessly spewed insides. Back into the pocket I go and off we walk, the murderer and me, the killer and his knife that have taken yet another worthless life. Post views, 2231. Please wait.